Some of these SUVs look completely normal in a dealership showroom. Clean lines, smooth test drive, confident salesperson. Then, somewhere around the 30,000 or 40,000 mile mark, owners start noticing the same warning lights, the same clunks, the same expensive trip to the service department that wasn't supposed to happen this soon. That's the pattern mechanics keep seeing, and it's the pattern Consumer Reports keeps confirming through owner surveys covering hundreds of thousands of vehicles. A few SUVs on this list actually surprised the data. One nameplate improved dramatically after a rough start. Another is still struggling years after launch, no matter how much software gets pushed out. And the one sitting at number 1 has a problem expensive enough to change the math on whether it's worth buying at all. So let's start with number 7. Number 7. Volkswagen Taos. Mechanics rarely warn buyers away from a compact crossover before they've even driven it, but the Taos earns a different kind of reputation shop by shop because the story of its transmission is almost a cautionary tale on its own. Early Taos models paired a 1.5-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder with a dual-clutch automatic, and that gearbox turned out to be the vehicle's biggest liability. Some owners reported serious failures, and the transmission often felt as though it was coming apart during everyday driving. Hesitation pulling away from a stop, clunky low-speed shifts, and in worse cases, a loss of drive that left owners stranded in traffic. Volkswagen eventually swapped in a conventional 8-speed automatic, and that's genuinely a better transmission. But here's the catch a lot of shoppers miss. Plenty of early build Taos models are still on the road, still under 40,000 miles, and still carrying that original dual-clutch unit. If you're looking at a used Taos and the seller can't tell you which transmission is underneath it, that's a question worth answering before you sign anything. The engine itself isn't blameless either. It's part of a broader pattern with small displacement turbo engines pushed hard in a crossover body, and the 1.5-liter turbo has shown a tendency toward troublesome behavior, including some serious failures. Add in electrical gremlins that show up more often than owners expect, and you get a vehicle that still isn't a safe long-term bet, with servicing that can be frustrating and expensive. Daily commuters tend to notice these problems first, simply because they're putting steady stop-and-go miles on that dual-clutch system week after week. Road trip owners sometimes get a lighter dose of trouble, since highway cruising puts less stress on the gearbox than city traffic does. That's a small but meaningful detail if you're trying to figure out whether a used Taos actually fits how you drive. Here's the thing though, the Taos looks great on paper. It's efficient, it's compact, it fits city driving beautifully. That's exactly why it makes this list. The vehicles that disappoint owners the most aren't the ones that look bad from the start. They're the ones that look perfect until the warranty clock starts ticking down. While the Taos struggles with a transmission it's already trying to leave behind, the next SUV on this list has a much older problem, one baked into an engine design that 2 entire brands have wrestled with for years. Number 6. Kia Seltos. Starting off our list at number 7 is the redesigned 2027 Kia Seltos, unveiled at the New York International Auto Show alongside Kia's new EV3 electric model. This subcompact SUV is expected in dealerships by June, going up against a genuinely crowded field of small SUV competitors including the Chevrolet Trax, Honda HR-V, Mazda CX-30, Nissan Kicks, Toyota Corolla Cross, and Volkswagen Taos, a segment where fresh, meaningfully different styling can make an enormous difference in showroom traffic. What makes this redesign genuinely worth waiting for is the styling direction Kia has taken with it. According to Kia's own announcement, the new Seltos borrows heavily from the design language of the larger, extremely popular Telluride, giving this entry-level SUV a much bolder, more substantial road presence than the outgoing model ever had. For buyers who love the Telluride's look but can't justify the price or size of a full 3-row SUV, this redesigned Seltos essentially brings that same design DNA down to a genuinely affordable, compact footprint, letting shoppers on a tighter budget buy into a similar aesthetic without stretching their finances into a considerably larger and more expensive vehicle. The bigger news, though, is under the hood. Alongside the standard gas-powered version, Kia has confirmed a hybrid Seltos is arriving later in the year, featuring front or all-wheel drive, with the all-wheel drive hybrid specifically using an electric rear axle rather than a traditional mechanical drive shaft, running the length of the vehicle. That's a genuinely modern approach to hybrid all-wheel drive that most competitors in this specific price segment don't currently offer at all, since electric rear axle setups have historically been reserved for pricier vehicles higher up in a manufacturer's lineup. Kia has also been notably tight-lipped about final pricing, stating only that figures will be announced closer to the actual sales date, which is a common strategy manufacturers use specifically to keep pricing competitive against rivals right up until launch, rather than tipping their hand months in advance and giving competitors time to react. Combine class-leading styling inspiration with a genuinely innovative hybrid powertrain, and this redesigned Seltos is shaping up to be a serious disruptor in the budget subcompact SUV space, exactly the segment where most manufacturers tend to play it safe with incremental updates rather than genuinely innovate on both design and mechanical layout at the same time. Number 5. Lincoln Aviator. When the Aviator relaunched in 2020, Lincoln wanted it to compete with the biggest names in luxury three-row SUVs. Consumer Reports had a different reaction entirely. The 2020 and 2021 models scored just 8 out of 100 in Consumer Reports' predicted reliability assessment, a number so low it's almost hard to believe it came from a vehicle starting near $50,000. The trouble wasn't hiding in one obscure component either. Major trouble spots included in-car electronics, climate systems, steering, suspension, power equipment, and body hardware. Owners described a familiar frustration: infotainment screens freezing mid-drive, CarPlay refusing to connect without a full restart, and random interior lights flickering on while the vehicle was moving. One owner told Consumer Reports the connection issue happened roughly half the time they tried to use it. Long-term owners who spent years with early Aviators describe a pattern that will sound familiar to anyone who's dealt with a temperamental piece of technology. The problems weren't usually dangerous, just relentless. One owner who paid nearly $90,000 for a fully loaded Aviator described spending 7 of the vehicle's first several months in and out of the service department. That's not the ownership experience anyone pictures when they're signing paperwork on a luxury three-row. Here's what most buyers don't realize: the Aviator's story doesn't end there, and that's actually the interesting part. By 2022 and 2023, Lincoln had worked through most of the launch quality issues, and reliability surveys showed real improvement, with owners reporting noticeably fewer problems. Some forum owners even called the newer builds one of the more dependable options in the luxury midsize class. That's a genuine turnaround story. But it also means the used Aviator market is a minefield for anyone who doesn't know which years to avoid, because a 2020 model and a 2023 model can feel like completely different ownership experiences behind the wheel of the exact same nameplate. That's a crucial distinction for anyone comparing sticker prices on the used market. A tempting deal on an early Aviator might really be a discount for a reason, while a slightly pricier 2023 example could turn out to be the far smarter purchase over the next 5 years of ownership. If a luxury SUV can go from an 8 out of 100 disaster to a genuinely solid recommendation in 3 years, imagine what happens when an entire brand's newest technology bet goes the opposite direction, starting strong and getting worse. Number 4. Volkswagen ID.4. Volkswagen's electric SUV is losing value faster than almost any EV on the market. The Volkswagen ID.4 arrived carrying the promise of mainstream electric done properly by a manufacturer with a century of engineering heritage. In 2026, that promise has translated into one of the most disappointing depreciation stories in the current EV market, with used values collapsing at rates alarming for owners who purchased at or above MSRP during the vehicle's early allocation period. Starting at $38,990 when new, the ID.4 now trades in the used market at 35 to 45% of original purchase price after just 24 to 36 months. IC Car's depreciation data places the ID.4 among the top 5 fastest depreciating vehicles in the electric SUV segment, a position shared with manufacturers carrying far weaker brand reputations than Volkswagen commands globally. But here's the twist: the ID.4's depreciation isn't driven by one catastrophic failure, but by compounding factors that individually might be manageable. Persistent software instability across multiple model years and over-the-air updates introducing new problems while resolving old ones have collectively created a used market reputation that pricing reflects immediately and mercilessly. What most people don't realize is that the ID.4's depreciation is being significantly accelerated by the broader EV price war reshaping the market in 2026. Tesla's repeated price cuts have established new value benchmarks that pressure every competing EV's used pricing downward, regardless of individual product merit. When a Tesla Model Y with superior charging infrastructure is available at a similar used price, the ID.4's value proposition collapses entirely, and this is where it gets crazy. Number 3. Chevrolet Blazer EV. GM halted Blazer EV sales weeks after launch, and the used market never forgave it. The Chevrolet Blazer EV launched with strong pre-order interest and competitive pricing that positioned it as an accessible alternative to Tesla's Model Y. What followed is one of the most damaging new vehicle launch stories in recent American automotive history, and its consequences continue reverberating through the used market in 2026 with no signs of rapid resolution. Starting at $44,995 new, the Blazer EV now trades at 38 to 48% of original purchase price after 24 months. Software causing loss of propulsion, complete system shutdowns in normal driving, and charging failures requiring dealer intervention forced GM to halt all new Blazer EV sales, an action with almost no precedent in modern mainstream automotive retail, within weeks of first deliveries. But here's the twist. The reputational damage extends well beyond vehicles actually affected by the original software issues. Every subsequent Blazer EV sale carries the shadow of a launch failure, covered by every major automotive outlet and amplified through social media, reaching exactly the technology-forward buyer demographic that electric SUV manufacturers most need to convert. Used market buyers in 2026 are pricing against that documented history, and the discount they apply is severe. What most people don't realize is that GM's aggressive incentive strategy on new 2026 Blazer EV inventory, implemented to rebuild momentum, has established lower price anchors directly suppressing residuals for earlier model years. Buyers considering a used 2024 Blazer EV at $28,000 can access a new 2026 example with substantial manufacturer incentives at a transaction price, making the used vehicle's value proposition difficult to justify on purely financial grounds. Number 2. GMC Yukon. The Yukon is the vehicle family's buy because it feels like the safe, traditional choice. Full-size, gas-powered, built the old-fashioned way. That reputation is exactly why its reliability numbers catch so many buyers off guard. Consumer Reports scored both the Yukon and the extended Yukon XL well below average for full-size SUVs in its 2025 reliability survey. What's notable is where the problems are coming from. This isn't primarily an engine or transmission story, it's an electronic story wearing a traditional body. By mid-2025, NHTSA data showed additional recalls tied to software faults affecting the instrument cluster and braking-related functions, forcing over-the-air fixes and, in some cases, dealer visits. And it's exactly the kind of thing mechanics tell customers to take seriously rather than waiting on. There's also a financial sting most buyers don't see coming until it's their turn to sell. Depreciation data has pegged the Yukon at losing roughly 47% of its value within 5 years, a steep drop for a vehicle that can start near $70,000 and climb past $100,000 in top trims. Compare that to some of GM's own truck-based models holding on to significantly more of their value over the same period. And it's clear the Yukon's depreciation isn't just about size or fuel costs. Reliability reputation follows a vehicle into the used market, whether or not any individual owner ever experiences a problem themselves. Resale experts point out that this kind of gap rarely comes from one bad headline. It builds slowly through years of recall notices, owner complaints, and word-of-mouth warnings from mechanics who see the same instrument cluster glitches roll into the shop again and again. By the time a buyer is cross-shopping a used Yukon 3 or 4 years from now, that reputation will already be baked into the price, for better or worse, depending on which side of the transaction they're on. So if a $100,000 flagship SUV can carry electronics problems serious enough to trigger braking-related recalls, what does it take to earn the single worst spot on this entire list? The answer might surprise you because it's not about how much technology a vehicle has. It's about how deeply that vehicle's identity is tied to a design that's been fighting the same battle for years. Number 1. Jeep Wrangler. If you asked 10 different mechanics to name the SUV they'd warn a first-time buyer about, a surprising number would land on the Wrangler, not because it's a bad vehicle to drive, but because of what tends to happen underneath it once the miles start climbing. Start with the complaint volume. The current JL generation Wrangler has logged more than 3,500 NHTSA complaints since 2018, along with 37 recalls and 61 separate fire reports across the run. That's an enormous amount of owner-reported trouble for a single generation of vehicle. And the data splits in a very specific way depending on which Wrangler you're looking at. The 4xe plug-in hybrid alone accounts for 43% of all complaints in the generation, driven largely by a sequence of high-voltage battery recalls tied to fire risk. If you're shopping for a 4xe specifically, that's not a footnote. That's the headline. Gas-powered Wranglers aren't off the hook either. Electrical issues lead the complaint categories overall, and gas variants carry a well-known front-end steering problem owners have nicknamed the death wobble since this generation launched. It's exactly what it sounds like, the steering wheel violently shaking at speed, often triggered by hitting a bump, caused by worn or improperly torqued front-end components on the Wrangler's solid front axle. First-time victims frequently pull over immediately, convinced they've lost a wheel entirely, before realizing the vehicle is still driving normally once the shaking stops. It's not a mystery mechanics struggle to diagnose. It's a known characteristic of the platform that some owners experience within their first 40,000 miles, particularly if they've added larger tires or a lift kit that changes the geometry those components were designed around. Insurance adjusters and mechanics alike have seen enough of these cases that the term shows up almost universally across Wrangler owner forums, regardless of model year. Transmission complaints add another layer. Owners have reported everything from getting stuck in a single gear at highway speed to complete transmission failure requiring full replacement. And this isn't limited to high mileage examples. Some owners have reported shifting problems with fewer than 30,000 miles on the odometer. On top of that, the totally integrated power module, the unit controlling low-voltage electronics like headlights and the starter, has developed a reputation for triggering stalling. Owners running the eco-diesel variant have their own separate set of headaches to watch for, including oil cooler failures that can cause overheating and power loss, along with turbo lag and occasional DEF system faults. It's a genuinely torquey, efficient engine when everything's working correctly, but it adds yet another layer of complexity to an already complicated ownership picture depending on which powertrain a buyer chooses. Now here's the part that actually matters for anyone cross-shopping a Wrangler. None of this makes it a bad off-road vehicle. If anything, the Wrangler remains one of the most capable stock off-roaders sold in America, and long-term owners who understand its quirks often rack up well over 150,000 miles without major drama. But the specific combination that lands it at number one is this: a high volume of early life electrical and steering complaints, a fire recall history concentrated in its newest and most expensive powertrain option, and a design philosophy that hasn't fundamentally changed in ways that would eliminate the death wobble entirely. For a buyer expecting a trouble-free daily commuter, that's a mismatch mechanics see walk into their shop again and again, often around the same mileage window where the factory bumper-to-bumper warranty is starting to run thin. That combination, complaint volume, fire-related recalls on its most modern trim, and a decades-old mechanical quirk that still hasn't been fully engineered out, is why the Wrangler tops this list. It's not that the Wrangler can't be reliable. It's that reliability with this vehicle depends heavily on which version you buy, how it's been modified, and whether you're using it the way it was actually designed to be used. A stock Rubicon driven mostly on-road behaves very differently than a lifted 37-inch tire daily driver logging highway miles every day. Buyers who go in with clear eyes about that trade-off tend to be happy owners. Buyers expecting Wrangler capability with Camry-level dependability are the ones who end up surprised. The Wrangler's issues touch a huge share of the vehicles actually on the road right now. They span both its gas and plug-in hybrid lineups in different but serious ways, and they include a genuine fire risk in its newest and most heavily marketed powertrain. A buyer shopping specifically for the 4EC trim, drawn in by the promise of electric-assisted efficiency, may have no idea they're stepping into the version of the Wrangler carrying the highest concentration of complaints and recalls in the entire lineup. That's exactly the kind of gap between expectation and reality that turns an exciting purchase into an expensive regret. If there's one takeaway that applies across every SUV on this list, it's this: the vehicles that hurt owners the most financially and emotionally aren't usually the ones that seem obviously flawed in the showroom. They're the ones that drive great, look great, and only reveal their weaknesses once the odometer climbs past that critical 30,000 to 40,000 mile window, right as factory warranty coverage starts thinning out. Reading owner survey data, recall histories, and real mechanic feedback before buying isn't about being paranoid. It's about walking into a dealership with the same information the people fixing these vehicles every day already have. For anyone currently cross-shopping any of these 7, the smartest move is the simple one. Pull the specific model year's Consumer Reports reliability history and NHTSA complaint count before signing anything, not after. A few extra minutes of research can be the difference between years of trouble-free ownership and a garage full of surprises. So which SUV would you choose, and is there another model you think deserved a spot on this list?